And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. So let us hope that it's another great week. It has been a very eventful and very troublesome weekend, except if you're talking about the world of football, where there was a great game and the Seattle Seahawks won by 4 points, but won, and are going on to the Super Bowl. Okay, good news. That's quick. The more complicated news, a U.S. judge is considering pause to Minnesota crackdown as Trump dispatches border czar. That from Reuters. Now, dispatching a border czar means you could be sending him on a mission, which is the case here, or getting rid of him, both of which are possibilities. Meanwhile, the BBC reporting, Trump says administration reviewing everything after a fatal shooting in Minneapolis again. And there are 3 different editorial boards of the 3 most influential newspapers in the country where they denounce President Trump's Minnesota crackdown as a moral and a ethical and policy perversity, a perversion, moral and political failure, and a perversion of justice. Who says so? The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, the nation's 3 most influential newspapers. They all criticize the administration's escalating activity in the state of Minnesota. Meanwhile, there is more news from around the world. The Israeli military announced today that it has recovered the remains of the last deceased hostage in Gaza, marking the first time since 2014 that there are no Israeli hostages alive or dead being held in Gaza. Ron Gvili, an Israeli police officer whose body was taken to Gaza after he was killed on October 7th, 2023, was the last of the hostages slain or abducted on that date, whose remains were still in Gaza. He was posthumously promoted to the rank of first sergeant, according to the Israeli government. Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog said an entire people prayed and waited for this moment. And now the circle is closed. Meanwhile, after an identification process conducted by the National Center of Forensic Medicine, together with the Israeli police and the military rabbinate, officials notified his family that his remains had been identified and would be buried, the Israeli Defense Forces said in a statement. Meanwhile, closer to home, but still elsewhere, gunmen, plural, killed a Mexican mayor who urged government to tackle violent crime. The gunman shot dead the mayor to a Mexican city during a public event on Saturday, authorities said, in an area plagued by violence and organized crime. Carlos Manzo, the mayor of Uruapan in the western state of Michoacan, was killed in an attack in the city center, the National Public Security Agency said in a statement. Quote, 2 people involved in the incident were arrested and one of the assailants lost his life, they reported. Michoacan State has for years suffered violence from powerful drug cartels operating in the agricultural region seeking to extort farmers. Okay, meanwhile, this was not the situation with the killing in Minneapolis. CNN reports that the death of a second Minneapolis resident at the hands of federal immigration agents is deepening outrage over the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. 2 federal hearings are set to take place today, including one on whether to temporarily halt the crackdown in Minnesota. And what are they cracking down on? The latest victim, Alex Preddy, was an American citizen, a solid citizen, a nurse in an ICU unit for the Veterans Administration. Veterans Administration, that's us. That's the government. This is not somebody who came in to commit crime or has any criminal record or anything at all. 2 federal court hearings are set to take place today, including one on whether to temporarily halt the crackdown in Minnesota. Federal officials have declined to provide critical details substantiating their claim that an agent shot ICU, intensive care unit nurse, Alex Pretty, in self-defense. At least 2 agents involved appeared to have worn body cameras, suggesting there could be more footage that hasn't been made public yet. CNN's Stephen Collinson writes that the surge of federal forces in Minnesota is testing long-held understandings of constitutional rights. Yes, the victim was carrying a gun, but the gun was concealed, and he had a permit to hold that concealed gun. It was legal, and there's no evidence at all that he was in the midst of trying to harm any of the agents or any bystanders or anyone except himself, and he lost his life. The Hill, meanwhile, is reporting on something else that is we thought we had finished with, which is the likelihood of a government shutdown. Again? Yes, again. Is this related to what is going on in Minnesota? It is, actually. The idea here is that the Democrats seem determined to block funding for the whole program for the Department of Homeland Security, which is where this ICE attack is going on. Meanwhile, President Trump is saying that conservatives have room to celebrate and reason to celebrate. Why? Because he is dispatching Border Czar Tom Homan to Minnesota to oversee the immigration enforcement operation in the Minneapolis area. Oh, then it'll go better, right? In what was widely seen as an attempt to sideline Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. There are a number of commentators who are saying Kristi Noem has become a huge political liability for President Trump. He said in his post on Truth Social, "I am sending Tom Homan to Minneapolis, to Minnesota tonight. He has not been involved in that area, but he knows and likes many of the people there." Oh, that means it'll be fine. So declared Trump in a Monday morning Truth Social post. Tom is tough, but fair, and will report directly to me. Trump's decision came just 2 days after a Border Patrol agent shot 10 times, shot Alex Pretty, a 37-year-old intensive care unit nurse, while Noem subsequently claimed that Alex Pretty was actually arrived at the scene to inflict damage and harm and even murder on the agents of the Border Patrol ICE units, while Noem subsequently claimed that 37-year-old Pretty had arrived at the scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement. Footage of the incident contradicts her description of it. We'll hear some more about that and why this whole situation increases another government shutdown. All coming up on The Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, the nation is still reeling. Actually, the world is still reeling from the shooting death of Alex Pretty. And in fact, the Mirror, over on the other side of the pond in London, the Mirror reports Alex Pretty shooting aftermath horror as new clip shows federal agent clamping. A video of the moment Alex Petty was shot. He was shot with either 9 bullets or 10. They're not sure yet. A video of the moment Alex Petty was shot and killed shows a Department of Homeland Security member clapping nearby. Meanwhile, this report from the Mediaite, the Free Press, the right-leaning publication founded by CBS News editor-in-chief Barry Weiss, excoriated Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem and the Trump administration more generally in a new editorial under the headline, Kristi Noem's Reckless Lies. The Free Press took a wrecking ball to the claims the secretary has made about the death of a 37-year-old Alex Pretty, who was shot by a Border Patrol agent in Minneapolis on Saturday. Noem, said Saturday afternoon that Pretty was brandishing his firearm and that he impeded the law enforcement officers and attacked them. Noem added, the officers attempted to disarm the suspect, and the armed suspect violently resisted, fearing for his life and the lives and safety of fellow officers. An agent fired defensive shots. 9 of them? 10 of them? That's Noem's story, and she appears to be sticking to it, began the editorial. The problem for her and the president she serves is that there are multiple videos of the attack that show something completely different. Okay, this has all had a real impact already politically. The Republican Chris Madel, who was running for governor in Minnesota and running to replace, obviously, Tim Walz, who is resigning. He's dropped his campaign for re-election. He won't be there. But Republican Chris Madel announced he's ending his run for Minnesota governor, saying that he cannot support the national GOP's stated retribution on the citizens of our state, nor can I count myself a member of a party that would do so. In other words, the idea of calling Alex Pretty, may he rest in peace, calling him a domestic terrorist again, just like the Renee Good was called a domestic terrorist, it's obscene, it's absurd. And it's extremely dangerous to the Republican Party, by the way, and which is why you can see that the Republicans dropping their campaigns because they don't want to be associated with what's going on in Minnesota or what's going on nationally in terms of the ICE attempts. And by the way, this is a national matter. Is there anyone anywhere who feels safer right now because of this kind of conflict that is happening? And it does seem to me that it's very, very dubious. Meanwhile, on the Hill, they report that shutdown odds soar after a second ICE killing. Now, what does this have to do with a government shutdown? This explains it. The chances of a partial government shutdown at the end of the week, coming up this week, those chances are very much increased because of the shootings that have occurred and the deaths that have occurred. The chances of the government shutdown at the end of the week are significant in terms of the odds as computed by the Hill. Congress last week appeared poised to avoid a shutdown, with the House having approved the remaining appropriations bills for the rest of fiscal 2026. Okay, that would have been a good thing. But that bill funding the Department of Homeland Security was the most controversial segment of that bill. And the most controversial segment because it included funding for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Most Democrats in the House voted against DHS, Department of Homeland Security funding, citing concerns about the killing of Renee Good in Minneapolis earlier this month. And now there's the killing of Alex Preddy. Still, a handful of Democrats broke party lines to back the bill, and enough Senate Democrats seem likely to vote for that bill this coming week to stave off the shutdown before the end of Friday deadline. But the killing of 37-year-old Alex Preddy, an intensive care nurse at a local Veterans Administration hospital in Minneapolis, his killing on Saturday has thrown that into flux as Democrats excoriate ICE's conduct and make clear they will refuse to support the current DHS funding bill. All of this is dramatic and divisive and difficult, and maybe it's good news for Mike Lindell, who is also the My Pillow guy, who is also running, I think he's still running, for governor of Minnesota, which is a job that nobody seems to want right now. Trump administrations have portrayed the incident as one in which federal officers acted in self-defense. From Preddy, officials claimed he approached agents with a handgun, but multiple eyewitness videos have contradicted those claims. In one video, Preddy appears to be holding a phone while recording Border Patrol agents. When an agent shoves another person, Preddy moves to stand between them. That should not be a death sentence. The agent then sprays Preddy with a chemical irritant and brings him to the ground. And multiple agents surround Preddy as he and the officers begin to tussle. An agent appears to remove a handgun from Preddy's belt and move away from the area as another agent fires a shot at Preddy, followed by a few other shots after a brief pause. Preddy was licensed to carry his concealed weapon, his family said. More on the perspective of Wall Street Journal and others coming up on the Medved Show. And there are people out there who are insisting that this wasn't really a crime, it wasn't really an embarrassment, it was just a little bit of a mistake to shoot an emergency room nurse, an ICU nurse, intensive care unit for the Veterans Administration, 37 years old. Clean record. Apparently, you hear what people say about Alex Preddy, and he's a pretty stand-up, admirable guy. Look, I feel personally close to this because for many years, when she was a hospital worker and not a public school teacher, which came later, my mother worked for the Veterans Administration in Los Angeles. And the idea of a VA nurse being shot to death by at least 9 bullets, it's astonishing. And people say, yeah, well, how come he was carrying a concealed weapon? It is legal to get a certificate, to get a license to carry a concealed weapon everywhere in the country. And in some parts of the country, you don't even need a special license. In Texas, for instance, you're born with the Texas right to a concealed weapon. So state and local officials renewed their denunciations of the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. This is from The Hill, from their presence in Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, both Democrats, called on President Trump to pull federal officers out of the state. Obviously, they are not contributing to a sense of safety or togetherness or understanding or anything positive. They have also called for a full investigation into what happened, but the state has been cut out of the probe. Why has the state been cut out of the probe? Because the state officials, people in the state of Minnesota and the local police have been very dubious of the distorted vision of these shootings that has been coming out of the DHS. They've also called for a full investigation into what happened, but the state has been cut out of the probe. Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Superintendent, whose name is Drew Evans, said Saturday that DHS has taken over the investigation and shut out his agency. All of that is deeply problematic, but it's not the only thing. I mean, right now, the difficulties concerning how Americans feel about this aspect of their government, the Department of Homeland Security, and what they're doing. New York Times editorial headline says, "The Trump administration is lying to our faces. Congress must act." So what is it that Congress could and should do, according to the New York Times? That's a complicated matter. But they write in their editorial, the federal government owes Americans a thorough investigation and a truthful accounting of the Saturday morning shooting of Alex Jeffrey Pretty, a Minneapolis, on a Minneapolis street. When the government kills, it has an obligation to demonstrate that it has acted in the public interest. Instead, the Trump administration is once again engaged in a perversion of justice. Mere 3 hours after Mr. Pratt died, Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, declared without offering evidence that Mr. Pretty committed an act of domestic terrorism. What a phrase, considering the circumstances. Gregory Bovino, a Border Patrol official, offered his own assessment. This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. These unfounded and inflammatory judgments preempt the outcome of an investigation, which the Department of Homeland Security has promised. They also appear wholly inconsistent with several videos recorded at the scene. Those videos showed that Mr. Pretty had nothing but a phone in his hands when he was tackled by Border Patrol agents, and that he never drew the gun he was carrying and reportedly had a license to carry. Indeed, the videos seem to show that one federal agent took the gun from Mr. Pretty moments before a different agent shot him from behind. Separate analyses by the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Associated Press, and CBS News and other organizations all concluded that the videos contradict the Trump administration's description of the killing. They conclude that it is premature to read about what actually happened on that Minnesota street. The Trump administration, they write, should not have done so, and we will not do so, meaning the New York Times. What is clear, however, is that the federal government and officers who are carrying out Mr. Trump's crackdown on immigration, if the administration is allowed to act with impunity and avoid even the most basic accountability, the result will be more violence. And violence without a cause. One of the descriptions of some of the videos and what people found out from the videos show that Pretty originally got in a tussle with officers because he was trying to stand between the officers and a woman who was on the ground being beaten. David French, in his column about this, points out these folks protested with their hands on apparently loaded rifles. That's far more dangerous. He's talking about prior demonstrations. Alex Preddy never put his hand on his gun and was disarmed before he was shot. We know MAGA is about free speech for me and not for thee. Now it's gun rights for me and not for thee. David French points out we are witnessing the total breakdown of any meaningful system of accountability for federal officials. The combination of President Trump's January 6th pardons for the riot at the Capitol building, his ongoing campaign of pardoning friends and allies, his politicized prosecutions, and now his administration's assurances that federal officers have immunity just automatically. These are creating a new legal reality in the United States. The national government is becoming functionally lawless, and the legal system is struggling to contain his corruption. We're tasting the bitter fruit of Trump's dreadful policies, to be sure, but it's worse than that. He's exploiting years of legal developments that have helped insulate federal officers from both criminal and civil accountability. So where do we go from here? Where we go from here is listening to some of the reactions, both negative and, yes, some positive, about what has been happening with ICE and its confrontation with American citizens. That and more coming up on the Medved Show. And after the events of this weekend in Minneapolis, there is a new tone by the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, a new tone that became very notable on his Truth Social account. He posted over the weekend, Trump on Truth Social, Governor Tim Walz called me with a request to work together with respect to Minnesota. It was a very good call, says Trump, and we actually seem to be on a similar wavelength. I told Governor Walz that I would have Tom Homan call him, and that we are looking for is any and all criminals with a capital C, that they have in their possession. I think he means their custody, not in their possession. Not since the end of slavery in 1866, 65, 66, did we actually have people in our possession. The governor, very respectfully, writes Trump, understood that I will be speaking to him in the near future. He was happy that Tom Homan was going to Minnesota, and so am I. Anywhere but Washington, is that the idea? In any event, he continues. We have had such tremendous success, all in capital letters, in Washington, D.C., Memphis, Tennessee, and New Orleans, Louisiana, and virtually every other place that we have touched, and even in Minnesota. Crime is way down, but both Walz and I want to make it better. And then, exclamation point, President Donald J. Trump. Okay, this, I guess, is a sort of a helpful sign, at least some willingness, rather than the local authorities actually making the situation worse. And over the weekend, there were comments like that by Governor Walz. And I think that's one of the reasons that Trump is trying to tone some of this craziness down. Governor Walz could not help himself, apparently, at a press conference claiming that the ICE operatives were like Nazis and their victims were like Jews like Anne Frank hiding in the Holocaust. Here is Government Walz in a very non-helpful statement. Clip 20.
our children to go back to school. We have got children in Minnesota hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside. Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota. And there's one person who can end this now. And I'll go back to it again. Please show some decency, pull these folks out, reset this situation, and allow us to do the job that the Attorney General, myself, were elected to do, protect the people of Minnesota and carry out the laws of Minnesota.
Okay, that's, again, it's a solid plea, but the comparison with the Holocaust, where people were picked up for no crime, no violation of, quote, regulations or anything of the nation. They're just picked up for who they are. And they weren't just sent to prisons in El Salvador, though that's bad enough. They were sent to death camps where they were killed, and including small children. Now, again, is it appropriate to question what is going on with making children afraid to go out of their homes, making them afraid to go to schools, making this level of fear to be a real American curse? Yes, of course it's wrong. And the idea is that it's so at odds with what Trump had promised. Remember, he had promised they were going to round up the worst of the worst. People who were repeat criminals, who were murderers, who were cannibals, who were people who had been dispatched by other countries from insane asylums. The people who have been the victims, including Alex Preddy, who was killed over the weekend, these people are not even illegal aliens. They are American citizens. They are people who have lived here. And in many cases, even the people who are here without documentation have lived here peacefully and productively, paying taxes, paying their Social Security taxes, certainly, which everybody pays, and basically functioning in America. The typical undocumented immigrant has lived here for more than 10 years, with only a small minority of them having done any criminal violations of any kind. It is hardly focused on the worst of the worst. And the police chief of Minneapolis, Brian O'Hara, who we've heard from before, he made a terrific appearance on CBS Face the Nation and had this to say for the people that he serves in the police department in Minneapolis. This is clip 18.
Even if there is an investigation that ultimately proves that at the time of the shooting it was legally justified, I don't think that even matters at this point, because there is so much outrage and concern around what is happening in the city.
What do you mean it doesn't matter at this point? You mean the situation on the ground is already, the impression is left?
People have had enough. This is the third shooting now in less than 3 weeks. The Minneapolis Police Department went the entire year last year recovering about 900 guns from the street, arresting hundreds and hundreds of violent offenders, and we didn't shoot anyone. And now this is the second American citizen that's been killed. It's the third shooting within 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. People have been speaking out, saying that this was going to happen again. And I think everyone is kind of waiting for folks on both sides to come together and just figure this thing out. This is not sustainable. This police department has only 600 police officers. We are stretched incredibly thin. This is taking an enormous toll trying to manage all of this chaos on top of having to be the police department for a major city. It's too much.
That is Police Chief Brian O'Hara of the city of Minneapolis. There was another comment from a retired United States Army Lieutenant General, whose name is Mark Hertling. He was on MSN Now, and talking about his impression of ICE and the job that they have been doing. This is clip 19.
was an epiphany for me this weekend as we watched this tragedy unfold before our eyes, seeing the film and then seeing people from both ICE and Department of Homeland Security lying about what happened, interspersed with the films that showed exactly what happened. And it started to hit me that, you know, ICE and DHS are neither military nor police. Both the military as a unit and the police of any city have different charters. But ICE's charter is civil immigration enforcement. That's their job, identifying, detaining, and removing individuals who violate immigration law. So that is more administrative and legal, not tactical. Yet these guys are running around, and from the standpoint of a former soldier, I will tell you they are an undisciplined militia, and the leadership is awful.
There is, speaking of awful leadership, another area of conflict, which is new. There is at Independence National Historical Park in Philadelphia, which is a sacred place for America. It's what includes the Liberty Bell. They have a museum about the American Revolution and more. They also had preserved some of the structure of the president's house. Now, this is before the Capitol had moved to Washington, D.C. President Washington, and for a few years, President Adams, before they actually moved the federal capital from Philadelphia to Washington, were there. And they had a display in part about the people who worked in the president's house in those years as slaves. It's been suddenly removed. Why? We will get to that and to more controversies and more suggestions for hope and working together and better days ahead for this greatest nation on God's green earth.